The gold tassel kept hitting my cheek. I remember that more than anything else. Not the crowd, not the applause still echoing from the auditorium down the hall, just that small, stupid tassel brushing my face every time I moved too fast. I was almost running. My valedictorian speech was still in the lecture hall where I'd left it that morning, and I had 11 minutes before they called my name. 4 years. 4 years of 3 a.m. study sessions with cold coffee and burning eyes. 4 years of watching everyone else go to parties while I stayed in the library because I knew that one day I was going to stand at that podium and it was going to mean something. I was glowing. I want you to understand that. I was genuinely, completely glowing. I pushed the lecture hall door open. The room was supposed to be empty. It wasn't. I heard her before I saw anything. A soft sound, private, almost hidden. A laugh I had known my entire life. My little sister's laugh. The one she saved for when she was trying to impress someone. Leo had her face in his hands. Her graduation cap was crooked. His mouth was on hers. Her fingers curled into the front of his shirt. Not desperate, not accidental, comfortable. Like they had done this before. Like they had done this many times before. In rooms I hadn't walked into yet. The speech fell out of my hand. I don't remember dropping it. One moment it was in my fingers and the next it was on the floor, and my sister was turning around and the look on her face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you finally won something you've wanted for a very long time. I found my mother near the reception table. She pulled me by the elbow into the corner before I could say a word. I told her everything. Standing there in my graduation gown, honors cord around my neck, crying the kind of crying that takes over your whole body before you can stop it. She waited until I was done. She straightened my collar, fixed the tassel, looked me in the eye. Aaliyah, you're going on that stage in 12 minutes. Whatever you think you saw, this is not the time. I looked past her at my father. He had heard every word. He looked back down at his drink. I picked my speech up off the floor on the way back, smoothed the pages against my leg, stood in the dark wings and told myself to breathe. They called my name. I walked out. I smiled. Have you ever been betrayed by the one person you would have taken a bullet for? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever felt this kind of pain. This story is for everyone who survived a betrayal they didn't deserve. They were in the third row. Leo had saved them front-facing seats, close enough that I could see his face clearly from the podium. He was sitting with his arm resting on the back of my sister's chair. Not around her, not quite, but close enough that anyone watching would feel the intention of it. My sister had changed her lipstick since the lecture hall. She looked unbothered, refreshed even. I stood at the microphone and looked out at 400 people and thought, none of you know what just happened. None of you have any idea. My father was to the left, near the aisle. He caught my eye the moment I found the podium. His expression didn't shift. He just gave one small, slow nod. Perform. So I did. I opened my mouth and I gave the speech I had written and rewritten 17 times. I talked about perseverance, about the cost of a dream, about the quiet dignity of doing hard things in hard seasons. The crowd laughed at the right moments. A woman in the 5th row dabbed her eyes. The dean nodded along like I was saying something profound. Every word felt like swallowing glass. Halfway through, Leo leaned over and whispered something to my sister. She covered her mouth with her hand, laughing. Quietly, privately. The way people laugh when they're sharing something that belongs only to them. I kept going. This is what they made me, I thought. A girl who smiles while she bleeds. When I finished, the applause was long and loud and meant nothing. I shook the dean's hand. I smiled for the photograph. I walked back to my seat and sat down 2 chairs away from my sister and stared straight ahead and did not say one word. My father found me at the edge of the hall afterward, when the crowd was still thick enough that no one would notice us. He leaned in close. Your mother's made a reservation at Rosario's, 8 o'clock. You'll ride with Leo. I'm not riding with Leo. His jaw tightened, just slightly. Aaliyah, tonight is not the night to be difficult. I looked at him, really looked at him. This man I had spent my entire life trying to make proud. This man who had watched me cry 20 minutes ago and looked back at his drink. Fine, I said, because that's what I always said. He walked away satisfied. He always did. I stood there in my graduation gown with my diploma in my hands and my honors cord around my neck, and I thought about the woman in the 5th row who had cried at my speech about perseverance. I wondered what she would think if she knew the girl at the podium had been falling apart for 3 hours, and nobody in her family had touched her shoulder once. Not once. Leo appeared at my side with his car keys and a smile that almost looked real. "Ready?" he asked. Like nothing. Like the lecture hall had never happened. Like my sister's lipstick hadn't been smeared an hour ago. I looked at his face and felt something go very quiet inside me. Not peace. Something colder than peace. "Sure," I said, and I followed him out. Rosario's was too bright. That's what I kept thinking. The chandelier light hit everything at the wrong angle. Too warm, too festive, too much like a celebration. The table was already set when we arrived. Champagne in the bucket. A small floral arrangement in the center that my mother had probably called ahead to arrange. My sister slid into the seat across from me without making eye contact. We ordered. We smiled at the waiter. My mother asked Leo about his residency plans, and he answered with the easy confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he deserved the room he was standing in. My father laughed at something Leo said. The chandelier hummed. The table gleamed. I set down my fork. "I saw them," I said, "in the lecture hall, before the ceremony." The table went quiet. Not the quiet of shock, the quiet of people who had already prepared for this moment. My mother sighed, the specific sigh she reserved for when she thought I was being unreasonable. "Aaliyah," Leo was comforting her. "You know how she gets overwhelmed when the attention isn't." He had his hands in her hair. "You've always cast a long shadow over your sister. She struggles with that. You know this. Mom, this is exactly the kind of thing you do," she said, her voice dropping to something smooth and final. "You make everything about you. Tonight was a family celebration." I looked at my father. He was cutting his steak, unhurried, like this was a conversation about the weather. "Dad." He set down his knife, looked up, and something in his face changed. Not softened, solidified. "I need you to listen carefully," he said. "I've used your signature on several clinic documents over the past 2 years. Expense accounts, a liability transfer. If anyone investigates, the paper trail leads to you." The table sounds fell away. "Leo's father funds your sister's tuition and my campaign. If you end this relationship, if you say one word publicly about any of this, I will tell the authorities you stole those funds. You will lose your medical license before you ever use it." I sat very still. My sister was looking at her plate. She already knew. Of course she already knew. "You would do that," I said, not a question. "I'm protecting this family." "You're protecting yourself." He picked his knife back up. "Same thing." I excused myself to the bathroom, ran cold water over my wrists the way I did when a situation exceeded what my body could process quietly. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, the honors cord still around my neck, mascara that had somehow survived the evening, a face that looked like mine but felt like a stranger's. I had spent 22 years believing my family was imperfect but safe. Standing in that bathroom, I finally understood. I was never a daughter to them. I was a policy, something they kept current because it was useful. I picked up my bag. I walked back out. I passed the table without stopping, past Leo's careful expression, past my sister's downcast eyes, past my father's steady hands, and I walked straight out the front door into the rain. Nobody came after me. I sat in my car and gripped the steering wheel and told myself to think. Think, Aaliyah. You're a doctor. You solve problems. But my hands were shaking, and the rain was getting worse, and the only thought that kept surfacing over and over was, I have no one. For the first time in my life, I have absolutely no one. I pulled out of the parking lot. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. The storm came fast. 1 minute the rain was manageable, the next it was a wall, the kind that turns headlights into blur and makes every road look like every other road. I had been driving for 20 minutes with no destination, just movement, just the need to not be stationary in my own life anymore. I was crying, properly this time, the kind I hadn't let myself do at the restaurant or the ceremony or the bathroom mirror. It came out ugly and uncontrolled, and I let it because there was no one to perform for anymore. I almost missed it. The black SUV was on the service road to my left, overturned in the drainage ditch, smoke rising from the engine in the rain. I saw it in my peripheral vision and registered it before I consciously decided to. My brain had been trained for 4 years to categorize emergencies without flinching. I pulled over. "Don't," said the part of me that had been raised to be careful. "You don't know what this is." But I was already out of the car. The SUV had taken serious damage, not from the road. The impact pattern was wrong for a simple accident. There were holes in the bodywork that I recognized from trauma training, from the pictures they showed us in emergency medicine. Bullet holes. I found him on the far side of the vehicle, half sheltered from the rain by the overturned chassis. Tall, dark clothing saturated with rain and something darker. One hand pressed to his left side with the focused pressure of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Eyes still open, barely, and tracking my movement the moment I came around the corner. Cold eyes. The kind that didn't ask for help even when the body desperately needed it. I dropped to my knees in the mud beside him and opened the emergency kit from my bag. "I'm a doctor," I said. "I need to look at the wound." He said nothing, but he moved his hand. I worked fast. The entry was clean. High velocity, missed the major vessels by less than 2 centimeters. He had been lucky without knowing it. I packed the wound, applied pressure, started assessing his vitals with the portable monitor I carried out of habit from residency prep. He watched my hands the entire time. "You're going to feel pressure," I said. "Don't move." He didn't. Somewhere in the middle of it, between one breath and the next, I realized I had stopped crying. My hands were completely steady. Whatever had been breaking apart in me at that restaurant had gone somewhere quiet, replaced by the only version of myself I had never doubted, the version that knew what to do in a crisis. "You have a name?" he said. His voice was low and controlled even through the pain. "Aaliyah?" He looked at me the way people rarely did, like he was actually registering the information, filing it. "Kangde," he said. He reached into his jacket with his free hand and held up a phone. One contact on the screen, no name, just a symbol. Someone answered in 3 seconds. He spoke in low, precise Korean without once taking his eyes off my face. I didn't understand the words, but whoever was on the other end clearly did, because within 4 minutes I heard engines in the distance, multiple, getting closer, fast. And the part of me that had been trained for emergencies said very clearly, "Whatever you just walked into, Aaliyah, you cannot walk back out of it the same way you came in. If you're still here, you already know this story is different. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. It's about to get complicated." The safe house smelled like cedar and something metallic she chose not to think about. Aaliyah worked in focused silence, finishing the suture with the kind of precision that came from muscle memory rather than thought. The room was sparse, a cot, a single overhead light, a table with things on it she didn't look at directly. 2 men stood near the door speaking quietly. Nobody explained anything to her. Nobody asked if she was all right. Kang Dae lay still and watched her work. "Why aren't you afraid?" he said. His hand caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to make her pause. She didn't look up from the suture. "Because the people I loved already tried to kill me today," she said. "A man with a gun is the least of my worries." Silence. Then, "What did they do?" She almost didn't answer. Nobody had asked her that all evening, not one person. The question landed somewhere undefended. She told him. Not everything, just enough. The lecture hall, Leo's hands, her sister's face, the restaurant, her father's voice, the document with her forged signature sitting somewhere in a filing cabinet that could end everything she had worked for. Kangde listened without flinching, without offering comfort, without telling her she was overreacting, or that family was complicated, or that she should give it time. He just listened, fully, completely, the way people almost never did. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Your family built a cage and called it love, he said. I know what that looks like. Something cracked open behind her sternum. Not grief, she was past grief for tonight. Something more like recognition. The specific relief of being understood by someone who has no reason to lie to you. You should sleep, he said. I'm fine. You've been running on adrenaline for 6 hours. Your hands are going to start shaking in about 20 minutes, whether you want them to or not. She looked at him. You're a doctor now? I know bodies under stress. A pause. I've caused enough of it. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her all day. No softening, no reframing. Just the plain truth of who he was, offered without apology. She sat down on the chair beside the cot, just for a moment, just to stop moving. He reached into the drawer beside him and set something on the table between them without ceremony. A black diamond ring. Not a proposal, something else entirely. Your father's leverage disappears if you have someone with more power than him standing between you and the law. I need a specific kind of cover for the next 6 months. What I'm offering you is protection, real protection, and a way to destroy everything he built against you. But once you step into my world, Aaliyah, there is no version of you that goes back to theirs. He looked at her steadily. So tell me, what do you want? She looked at the ring for a long time. Then she looked at him. I want a name that makes my father tremble. The corner of his mouth moved, almost nothing. Then we have an arrangement. She sat in the car outside her own house for 11 minutes, she counted. It was the kind of thing she did when her mind needed an anchor. Numbers were reliable when nothing else was. 11 minutes of watching the lights in the living room window, the blue flicker of the television, the silhouette of someone moving past the curtain. Part of her, the part that had spent a lifetime making herself smaller, quieter, easier to love, said, go back inside empty-handed. This is too far. You don't know this man. Then she thought about her father's face at that restaurant, the way he'd picked up his knife and kept cutting his steak while he dismantled her future. She got out of the car. Leah was in the living room, flowers on the counter, white tulips, her favorite, which meant he had thought about it enough to remember and still chose to do what he did, which was somehow worse. He stood up when she walked in. She could see the prepared version of events on his face before he opened his mouth. She didn't let him start. She held up her left hand. The black diamond caught the light from the hallway. His eyes dropped to it, back to her face, back to it. I'm not your good girl anymore, she said. I belong to the man who owns this city. The color left his face so completely it almost looked clinical. Leo, confident, easy, never questioned a day in his life Leo, suddenly looked very small inside his own expression. For the first time in 4 years, Aaliyah felt warm. She didn't wait for him to respond. She walked past him to her room and pulled her duffel bag from the top shelf, started filling it with the things that actually mattered. Her medical certifications, her external hard drive, the photograph of herself at 14 that she kept in the bottom drawer because it was from before she learned to perform. She moved efficiently. She did not look back at the door. This is what training feels like, she thought. Knowing what to take when you're leaving something that's on fire. Leo appeared in the doorway. Aaliyah, don't. Just let me explain. Leo. She zipped the bag and straightened, looked at him with the same steadiness she used for difficult patients. You don't have an explanation. You have an excuse. There's a difference. I've been accepting excuses my whole life, and I'm done. She picked up the bag. He didn't move from the doorway. You don't know what you're getting into. That man. People don't just move, she said quietly. He moved. She was at the front door when her phone buzzed, her sister's name on the screen. She almost let it go. Then she answered. The voice on the other end wasn't apologetic. It wasn't even careful. Her sister said, whatever you think you're doing, you have no idea what you just started. Dad is already making calls. Aaliyah stood in the open doorway with the rain still falling outside and her whole life in a bag on her shoulder and said, good, let him. She hung up, walked into the rain, didn't look back once. The estate announced itself before the gates did. It was the quality of the silence first, the way the surrounding streets went gradually quieter the closer you got, like the city itself understood there were places you didn't bring noise. Then the grounds, then the stone, then the entrance that made every house Aaliyah had ever called home feel like a rehearsal. Her family arrived in their best. Her mother in the navy dress she saved for occasions she needed to impress. Her father with the handshake ready and the smile that won elections. Her sister in something fitted and deliberate, eyes moving over the rooms like she was calculating square footage. Dinner was precise. Staff appeared and disappeared without being summoned. Kangdae sat at the head of the table and said very little, which Aaliyah had learned meant he was paying attention to everything. Her father made several attempts at establishing rapport. Kangdae responded with enough to be polite and nothing more. Her mother complimented the home. Kangdae thanked her without warmth. Her sister waited. Aaliyah watched her wait. The way she angled herself in Kangdae's peripheral vision, the way she laughed a measure too loudly at the right moments, the practiced tilt of attention that had worked on every room her whole life. She was patient. She had always been patient when she wanted something. Her moment came when Kangdae stepped briefly from the dining room. Her sister followed at an interval that was meant to look accidental. Aaliyah stayed at the table. 2 minutes later, Kangdae walked back in. He didn't look at her sister, who had repositioned herself near the library entrance with a glass of wine and her best expression. He looked across the room at Aaliyah. "She has 5 minutes to leave on her own," he said quietly. Then he picked up his drink and returned to his seat. 2 men materialized from somewhere. Her sister's expression went through several things very quickly. Confusion, then indignation, then something that looked close to fear. She was escorted from the room before she could redirect the moment. The dining room continued as if nothing had interrupted it. Aaliyah reached for her water glass and realized her hand was steady. That surprised her. She had expected something dramatic from herself. Triumph, or relief, or the particular satisfaction of watching her sister lose at her own strategy. Instead, she just felt grounded, like the floor was solid and she was standing on it correctly for the first time. Someone had decided, without being asked and without needing to explain it, that she was worth defending. Not because she had performed for it, not because she had made herself smaller to earn it, just because she was his, and that was sufficient. Her mother found her in the hallway near the end of the evening, voice low and careful, grip tight on her arm. "You think this man loves you? He doesn't. Men like him don't love anything. They acquire. And when he's acquired enough of whatever it is you're giving him, he will leave you with nothing and no one." Aaliyah looked at her mother's hand on her arm, then at her face. "That's exactly what you had planned for me, wasn't it? At least he told me the truth about what this is." She removed her mother's hand, walked back toward the light. Her mother didn't follow. 3 weeks inside Kangdae's world, and Aaliyah had learned several things. She had learned that silence in that house was not emptiness, it was information. The way a room went quiet when certain names were mentioned. The way his men moved differently on different days. The shift in posture that meant something had changed in the night. She had learned to read the temperature of a space the way she read a patient's chart, looking for what was absent as much as what was present. She had learned that Kangdae was being lied to by someone close to him. She didn't have a name yet, but the pattern was there if you knew how to look. Small inconsistencies in reported timelines, numbers that didn't reconcile. A particular lieutenant whose eye contact lasted a half-second too long when certain topics came up. She kept her observations to herself, filed them, waited. She found the drawer by accident on a Tuesday afternoon. She was in his private office returning a medical reference book she'd borrowed, and the drawer was open. Just slightly, just enough. She should have closed it without looking. She looked. Photographs. A neat stack of them, each one paperclipped to a small card. No names written anywhere. Just a face, a date in the corner, and nothing else. She flipped through slowly. Faces she didn't recognize. Men and women caught in unguarded moments. Someone laughing outside a courthouse. Someone else mid-sentence at what looked like a formal dinner. Then her father's face. Already there, already dated. 3 months before graduation night. She stood very still. Kangdae appeared in the doorway. He looked at the photograph in her hand, then at her face. He didn't apologize for the open drawer. "You already knew," she said. "I know most things before they become problems. Did you know about me? Before the alley?" A pause that told her something. "I knew of your father. I didn't know about you." She set the photograph down carefully. "Is that the truth?" "I don't lie to people inside my house," he said. It's inefficient. She almost laughed, didn't. He crossed the room and took the photograph, returned it to its place. Then he stayed standing at the drawer for a moment. Your father is moving faster than I expected. He filed something 2 days ago. He held out a document. Her name, her signature, forged cleanly, attached to figures that would end her career and her freedom simultaneously. We have 72 hours before this goes public, he said. She took the document, read it once, set it on the desk. Then we need to move first, she said. He looked at her. You handle the legal intercept. I'll find your rat. A beat of silence. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, more like recalibration. The lieutenant, she said. Park Shin-woo, third from your left at every meeting, slightly offset from the others. His report times don't match the surveillance logs on the East Corridor. I checked 3 weeks back. Someone's been feeding information out, and he's the only position that makes the timeline work. Kang-dae looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. You're sure? It wasn't a question. I'm a diagnostician, she said. I don't guess. The fundraiser was her father's cathedral. He had built the guest list over 18 months. Donors, journalists, city officials, people whose presence in a photograph was worth more than their check. The venue was the kind of place that made everyone feel like they were already inside history. Her father moved through it like a man who had never once questioned his own belonging. Aaliyah arrived late, intentionally. She wore black, simple, architectural, the kind of dress that needed no explanation. Kang-dae walked in beside her, and the room did what rooms always did around him. It adjusted. Not loudly, just a subtle recalibration of attention, the way a crowd shifts when the temperature changes. They didn't approach her family. They found a position near the back and waited. Her father took the stage at 9 o'clock. She had watched him give speeches her whole life, and she knew his rhythms, the warm opening, the personal anecdote, the pivot to vision. He was good at it. She had always known he was good at it. That was part of what made everything so complicated for so long. He was 4 minutes into the speech when the screens changed. Every monitor in the room, event displays, the live stream panels, the screens flanking the stage, switched simultaneously to the same footage. The lecture hall, her sister's yellow dress. The timestamp in the corner, crisp and unambiguous, 3 hours before the ceremony. The room went the kind of quiet that happens before something irreversible. Her father stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the screens, then at the crowd. Then, across the room, through 400 people, he found her face. She didn't look away. He had spent her entire life teaching her to be the one who flinched first. She stood completely still and let him look. Was that enough? Kang-dae said quietly beside her. She watched her father grip the podium, watched the donors exchange glances, watched a journalist in the third row already reaching for her phone. Almost, she said. The side door opened. A city prosecutor she recognized from news coverage. Not a police officer, not a uniformed presence, but someone whose appearance at a political fundraiser meant the kind of trouble that didn't resolve quietly. He was walking directly toward the stage with the deliberate pace of someone executing a plan. Kang-dae had filed the documents 6 hours ago. Every forged signature, every fraudulent account, every liability transferred into Aaliyah's name, all of it packaged and delivered to the one office her father had never managed to reach. Her father saw the prosecutor. His hands left the podium, and for the first time in Aaliyah's memory, her father looked small. Now, she said quietly, now it's enough. The charges were filed by morning. Leo's name appeared in the civil documentation by afternoon. Not criminal, but the kind of association that followed a person. Her sister called 7 times between 6 and 9 a.m. Aaliyah let every call go to voicemail and did not feel guilty about it, which itself felt like a kind of arrival. She stood on the penthouse balcony as the city moved below her, unhurried, indifferent, honest in the way cities were when you stop needing them to mean something specific. The air was cool. Somewhere below, her father was sitting in a room answering questions from people he could not charm or manage or threaten into silence. She took out her old phone, scrolled through it slowly. 4 years of Leo, messages she had reread at 2 a.m. looking for evidence that she was loved correctly. Photographs from dinners where her sister had also been present and she hadn't let herself notice. A thread with her mother full of responses that were always just slightly shorter than what Aaliyah had sent. She read it all. She let herself see it clearly and completely, without softening any of it. Then she held the phone over the railing and let it go. Watched it disappear into the dark below, felt nothing fracture, felt something, quietly, without ceremony, settle. Gangde came to stand beside her, not close enough to crowd, just present, the way he had learned to be, available without demanding anything from the space. Was it worth it? He asked. She thought about the lecture hall, the tassel against her cheek, 11 minutes in a car outside her own house, convincing herself she didn't deserve more than what she had been given. Every second, she said. He was quiet for a moment. The city moved below them. Somewhere a siren, somewhere music. The ordinary continuing machinery of a place that didn't pause for personal reckonings. The contract terms are technically satisfied, he said. Your father's leverage is gone. You don't owe me anything past today. She turned and looked at him, really looked, the way she had in that alley when he was bleeding in the mud, and she was crying, and neither of them had anything left to perform for anyone. He looked back the same way, no angle, no strategy, just two people who had chosen each other out of wreckage and found something neither of them had expected. I know, she said. She went back inside. He followed. Some people have to lose everything to realize they were holding on to nothing. Aaliyah didn't lose a family. She finally understood she never had one. And in the wreckage, she built something they could never touch. If this story moved you, subscribe and drop a comment below. Do you believe people like Aaliyah's family ever truly change? Or do some people only understand loss when it finally finds them? I'm reading every single one.